Former Stargate SG-1 co-star Christopher Judge pitched a spin-off project that would continue the story of the Free Jaffa, and now new details about it have surfaced. Judge spoke about the project on the newest episode of Michael Rosenbaum's podcast, Inside of You. Gateworld has some additional context to add through our own reporting. This was much more than a short-lived pitch for a second season of Stargate Origins before the web series was cancelled. The project was in development before, during, and after Origins, and could have extended the SG-1 universe as a straight-up sequel. Judge told Michael Rosenbaum, "While I was doing God of War, my partner and I were pitching a spin-off that made it through 3 different regimes. This spin-off was about what happened to Teal'c and his race, because at the end of the show, they've gained their freedom, and now they have inherited all this technology from those that they served. So what do? The defeat of the Goa'uld System Lords in the show's 8th season led to the birth of the Free Jaffa Nation, a dream of Teal'c and Bra'tac that was finally realized, though with it came no shortage of new battles to fight. That included the political arena. SG-1's final 2 seasons saw the Jaffa struggle toward democracy, battle a new kind of religious oppression from the Ori, and ultimately face an all-out attack on their sacred world of D'Kara. But Stargate's mythology left plenty of stories to tell about Teal'c and the Jaffa people after they had cast off the shackles of oppression. Who would the Jaffa become now that they had their own ships and technology, and were masters of their own destiny? Judge's story pitch is provocative, focusing on the emergence of a stable, free Jaffa people as a real force to be reckoned with. He said, 2 of the episodes I wrote were about the Amazonian mythology, so it would be Stargate's take on the Amazonian mythology. So I pitched Stargate's take on Black Panther. So we, as this insulated people, now have our freedom. We've inherited this technology, and now we became this culturally and technologically advanced society. So what burden comes with that? Do you help other people, or do you keep it to yourself? Jaffa society could evolve in ways that parallel the Marvel Universe's hidden nation of Wakanda. Black Panther represented a people whose access to the rare element vibranium helped them to rapidly advance their technology in secret, subverting the Western world's historical exploitation of African peoples through colonialism and the slave trade. As the world discovers Wakanda's existence in the comics and the films, the people of Wakanda must decide whether to help the outside world or continue in their isolationist ways. The Jaffa, on the other hand, were slaves to the Goa'uld for millennia. In the aftermath of the System Lord's downfall, they embraced their personal and political freedom, but they also came into possession of their captors' advanced technologies. Ships and fighter craft, weapons, sarcophagi, subspace communications devices, and doubtless much more that the television show never explored. Even healing devices, which in theory require Goa'uld biology to operate, might be reverse engineered by a new generation of Jaffa scientists. An ongoing series centered on the Free Jaffa would have been a fascinating new direction to take the franchise, which has focused primarily on humans from Earth and their experiences of the wider galaxy. So when did all this happen, and why didn't Judge's Stargate Wakanda project ultimately turn into a series? Judge began pitching the show ahead of the 2018 release of God of War, his first project with developer Santa Monica Studio. The timing is notable as the modestly budgeted web series Stargate Origins was produced in 2017 and released in the winter of 2018, just ahead of God of War's launch. So MGM heard this story pitch, but opted instead to go with Origins, which was intended to be a collection of standalone prequel stories set in the Stargate universe. The first story was based on the character of Catherine Langford from the original feature film, but there was every intention at the time to make additional installments, which could have told origin stories anywhere in the established canon. The origins of the Tok'ra, or the System Lords, or the Ancients, or the Jaffa. Stargate Origins would find a cold reception among fans, in part because of its lack of much connection to the television universe. By the summer of 2018, MGM was weighing whether or not to do a second installment of the web series, with a larger budget, but still small in scale. At around $1 million, Origins was, after all, made to be a short-form series streaming on its own subscription platform, Stargate Command. But here's the thing, Judge's story stayed in the mix. In convention appearances, he was stating publicly that he wanted to do a Jaffa Origins story, at the time under the title Return of the Jaffa. We covered this here on the channel at the time. So what's new here? Well, now we know that his talks with the studio continued during and after Stargate Origins. After Origins got a green light, Judge and his creative partner Mike Disa morphed the concept to fit that mold, but also expand it. They wrote a script which would begin the Wakanda story, while evidently also telling the story of a younger Bra'tac. Judge told fans at San Diego Comic-Con in 2018, "A lot of the questions that I get are, so what happened to the Jaffa? Now that they are free, what are they doing now? I have an answer. I would love to tell the Bra'tac origin story. How did the Free Jaffa movement start, and how was Bra'tac involved in it? How did Bra'tac become Bra'tac? I really thought that would be interesting." As a second installment of the web series, a Jaffa Origins project would have been a standalone story, less ambitious than a full-fledged TV spin-off, but also with the potential to continue on. It could break out from Origins' short format, and perhaps even set up an ongoing spin-off much larger in scale. Unfortunately, Origins and the Stargate Command platform failed. If the Stargate Wakanda idea was going to find a foothold at the studio, it would have to happen another way. By early 2019, Stargate SG-1 co-creator Brad Wright was also working with MGM on a separate Stargate project of his own. This would eventually evolve into a pilot script for a fourth live-action series, which was to pick up with Earth and the existing characters years after we last saw them. Gateworld has learned that at this time, the Free Jaffa spin-off was also still a live possibility inside the studio, even as Wright continued to develop his own project in parallel. Maybe there was space for both of these pitches. At one point, the studio was considering Judge's idea for another round of Origins, while Wright could serve as a creative consultant and then continue on from there with the next full-fledged series, bringing the franchise into a new era. As 2019 rolled on, however, studio executives were clearly having misgivings about committing to another round of Stargate Origins, or continuing the subscription service at all. Meanwhile, Christopher Judge was beginning work on the God of War sequel, and in October, MGM announced that Stargate Command would close at the end of the year. But Judge suggested that his conversations with the studio continued in some form up until MGM was acquired by Amazon, a deal first announced in May of 2021. He told Rosenbaum, "3 regimes loved it, and then we were bought by Amazon." That, it seems, was the end of the road for the Free Jaffa project. Brad Wright's script also wasn't going to survive Amazon's acquisition of MGM, which was finally completed in early 2022. The COVID pandemic blocked him from pitching his new show to TV and streaming outlets in 2020, and then, with the sale to Amazon looming, the project was shelved. Then the deal closed, and by the fall of 2022, Wright said that it looked like his script would not be produced. Amazon wasn't looking for his help with figuring out Stargate's future. Today, 2 years later, fans are still waiting for the newly formed Amazon MGM Studios to announce any new Stargate projects. Christopher Judge went on to find massive success in the video game world with his starring role as Kratos in the award-winning God of War, which continued with 2022's God of War Ragnarok. Ironically, Amazon and Sony are now developing a live-action adaptation of God of War for Prime Video. Judge is definitely old enough and ripped enough that he could play Kratos in live action. But would Judge return to Stargate one day? Or has that mothership sailed? The actor said he is willing to return to the franchise, and certainly if it included his vision for how to continue the story of the Jaffa people. He said, "I would definitely be interested in doing something like that. And even a different Stargate, Yeah, if the deal was right, if the scheduling was right, I would consider it. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think of Chris Judge's Stargate Wakanda idea. Would this be a good way for Amazon to expand on the mythology instead of rebooting Stargate from the beginning? Subscribe now to Gateworld for the latest Stargate goodness. Next up, find out how SG-1's writers slowly started writing Jack O'Neill out of the show as early as Season 6. Click this video to hear that story.